and welcome to another Every Tuesday tutorial. In this tutorial we are going to be creating this fairy tale wedding invitation from scratch in Illustrator. I'm going to be using a Wacom tablet to create these hand-drawn flourishes, and then we'll typeset everything right here in Illustrator. So I've already pulled the color scheme that I used for this over here, and I'm actually going to copy everything here just to kind of speed the tutorial along and to use as a guide for ours. So I'm just going to copy this and we're going to create our new document by going File, New. And this document's going to be 7 inches wide by 5 inches high. And because we've got color going to the edge on every edge, we need a bleed on this. So we're going to use a typical 1/8 inch bleed, which is equivalent to 0.125 inches. And this is going to be CMYK since it will be printed. And if you don't see this, you can just toggle down this advanced arrow. And we want our resolution to be 300 ppi, which is the print high resolution standard. So I'm going to hit OK. And I'm going to paste everything we just had in over next to it. And I'm going to grab my color scheme and put it above it. And just to let you know the colors that we're going to be using, I'll show you what they are. So this really light yellow is cyan 0, magenta 0, yellow 21, and black 2. The gold is 0, about 23 for magenta, 72 for yellow, and 11 for black, which actually I'm going to change this right now just so we're all working with the same colors. I'll make that 11. This light gray is 2 for cyan, 0 for magenta. Let's do yellow 7, and black will do 46. I'm just rounding up. And this dark gray is everything 0 except for black, which is 87. So now that we have this, the first thing I usually do is set a background layer that I also lock, so I don't mistakenly move it around when I'm working on top of it. So we're gonna create our background right now. So in my layers palette, I'm gonna hit this little icon down here to create a new layer, and I'm gonna label it background. And because it goes underneath everything, I'm gonna drag it below my first layer, and I'm just gonna hit M on my keyboard to grab my rectangle tool, and I'm just gonna drag out a rectangle, and it's gonna go all the way to this red bleed line. So now that I have that, I'm gonna lock my layer. And the next thing I usually do is drag a guideline to the center so everything is aligned and kind of symmetrical. So I need to get my rulers activated, and you can do that by hitting Command R on a Mac or Control R on a PC. And then I just need to make sure that I'm on the layer that's unlocked and click and drag. And I need to go to 3.5 since it's half of my 7-inch width. So now that I have my guide, we're going to get into drawing this flourish that we're using right here. And it's actually a lot easier to make than it looks. So we're going to go through each part of it. So the way I usually draw these flourishes, and you can see in my lettering tutorial that I did recently, I start out by using the brush because it gives me a limited number of points, which makes it a lot easier to clean up and kind of smooth the edges that look a little off later on. Whereas if I use the pencil tool, I get a bunch of points and it'd take me a lot longer to clean up. So I start with a brush, but once my brush is when my work is complete with the brush, then I go in and I make it a unified brush, and then I adjust the stroke in the stroke palette to replicate the effect that my brush was given. All that sounds really complicated, but I promise it's really easy, and we're going to do all of it. So let me start by grabbing my brush, and up here I've got a 5-point round brush selected, but I actually want a smaller brush. And I want to make sure it's round. So I'm going to double click on this 15-point round because I want to keep my 5-point round up there for later. So just make sure you have an angle of 0, a roundness of 100%, and my size is going to be 2.5. I'm going to hit OK. So now that I've got my brush, I'm going to switch over to my Wacom tablet, which I'll leave in the video description the exact type of Wacom tablet I'm using. I've had it for a little over a year, and I still love it, so I would highly recommend it. So I've got my Wacom. I need to make sure that I'm using the color that I want, and that is this main gold color. So I'm just going to hit I on my keyboard and eyedropper that color. And I'm going to go back to my brush by hitting B on my keyboard. And this shape, I'm only going to draw half of it so we can replicate it and it'll all be symmetrical. So this main shape is the first shape I'm going to draw. And you can draw a guideline if you want, just so you have kind of a baseline to work off of. So that's not a good start. Okay, so now that I've got this one, I also need these two pieces, which I actually drew separately. And then I also need this inner line, which you can, actually I might switch over and use the pen tool to draw that part in. So actually this is the only part that I really need my brush for. So I'm going to go back to my mouse and let's take a look at the points. So I'm going to take everything that I've got selected here and I'm going to toggle down and select basic, and then I'm going to go over to my stroke palette. I'm going to make the weight 2.5 like we originally had for the brush, and then I'm just going to apply a rounded cap and a rounded corner. So now I have the exact same thing as the brush, except sometimes the brush gives these little variations that I don't like, so this ensures that it's always super clean, so that's why I do that. So the first thing I notice is this is looking really flat up here. So I'm going to come in here, I hit my A key on my keyboard, and I'm just going to play around with my points so it feels a little smoother. Do the same thing over here. And I actually don't need this, so I just hit the hyphen key on my keyboard to get my anchor point delete tool. Switch back by hitting A. And it's nice to try and reduce the most number of points as you can, because you just get smoother lines overall with fewer points. So that's pretty good, and I need to join these two together. And a really useful tool for this is to go into outline mode, which if you hit Command Y or Control Y on a PC, you can get to outline mode. And this helps me line these up exactly. So I'm going to go out of it by doing the exact same thing, Command Y or Control Y. I'm going to select both of these, and then I'm going to right click and click join. So now these are one path, they're not two items anymore. It goes from here, connects with this point, and goes on. So now that I have that, you can see I've got to add this inner line right here, this little decoration, and then we'll draw a heart in this other decorative element. So I got my pen tool, and I'm just gonna kind of find a spot. And do it again. Okay, So now we have to draw our little decoration right here, and we'll be able to use it over here as well. So I should only have to really draw it once. And these ones are really easy to draw. So I'm just going to grab my pen tool. I'm just going to click a point, and then right above it, if you have your Smart Guides turned on, you can follow it up and click again, and then just stretch and make sure this line, this handle that's pulling out, is perfectly straight like that. Release, and then all you have to do is click here again, and it comes out perfectly. So obviously I need a smaller one. I'm just going to replicate it. I held Alt on my keyboard as I dragged to make a duplicate copy. And now I'm just going to, if you hold Shift on your keyboard, it scales it proportionally. So I always hold Shift when I'm scaling down. Drag, hold Alt, and I'm just going to reflect vertically. Okay, so that's coming along. And now we have this element, and we've already got the first one. I need to make a circle. I'm going to grab my circle up here. I'm going to hold Shift, and that gives me a perfect circle. Alt, rotate it. Okay, so we've got that main, actually my circle needs to be just a little bit bigger, and this guy needs to be a little smaller. Okay, much better. All right, so this guy's gonna go right up here, and I'm gonna group all of these elements together. So I'm gonna hit Command G with all of them selected, and then I'm gonna hold Alt. I'm gonna drag, and while I'm dragging, I'm gonna hold Shift so it stays perfectly lined up. Then I'm gonna right click, transform, reflect, vertical, and line them up until they touch. And this needs to be grouped also, so I'm going to select everything, Command G or Control G on a PC. Alright, so now all we have left is our heart, and that's also pretty easy to make. Let me go back to my baseline, grab my pen tool. If you hold Shift, when you still have your pen selected, you can move your point. All right, so I'm going to grab this, Alt, Shift, transform, reflect, vertical. Now I can go back to outline mode, make sure those lined up, and they did. Right click, join. So now they're joined together, and I want this to be a little pointier. Just using my arrow keys a little bit. Okay, so we're gonna use this heart. It's not my favorite. I'd probably redraw it, but for the sake of time, we're gonna move on. It's a little cuter when it's small. All right. So we've got our main flourish. So I'm gonna group all these together. I'm gonna bring them over here. You can see that the whole element together is actually a lot smaller. So we're just gonna reduce the size a little bit. Okay, so I'm just gonna go through the typesetting for everything, just for the sake of time. So I'm just gonna go through the fonts, and every font I'm gonna list, every font used here is free and you can pick it up online. So I'll leave the links for all the fonts so you can pick them up, and I'm gonna go through the exact type settings for each one. So if you want to make this exact one, you'll be able to do it. So this first one is set in Allura, and it's 14.55 points, and everything else should be good. So I'm just going to drag this one over here, and you can see I always make sure this middle point lines up. So this is Novecento Sans Wide, and it's demi bold, and the rest of the name is set in the same font but in the normal weight. Same deal with the dude's name, and the "and" in the middle is also Allura. That's 28.55. So I'm going to grab all of this and drag it over, and you can see we've got this element that we still need, and I actually pulled that. Let me make a copy of this whole thing. I'm going to ungroup it so I can just grab this one element. And actually, if I just come over here and I switch these by clicking this arrow, it'll turn it into a fill, and now I've got that element. So that made it really easy. Obviously, it needs to be a little smaller. And then I'm just going to hold Alt, Shift, Transform, Reflect, and this time it's going to be a horizontal reflection. Okay, so the next line is also Allura, and it is 14.55 again. So I'm just going to drag this over. The date is Novecento Sans Wide, and it's the normal weight at 16.4 points, and also make sure you have tracking set at 100. All right, and this last line, 15.4 points, no tracking on this one. Okay, so now we just need the same flourish we had on the top, on the bottom. So I'm going to select it, I'm going to hold Alt, and as I drag, I'm going to hold Shift. And then I'm going to do another horizontal reflection. Okay, so whenever I'm putting files together, I'm going to delete all this extra stuff that we don't need. So in my layers palette, just to keep everything a little more organized, I'm going to take all these elements, just the oh, actually, you know what? What did we do here? I gotta flip this heart. That's what I thought. We don't want an upside down heart for a wedding. That would be not cool. All right, I'm gonna reflect this guy. All right. Much better. Okay, so as I was saying, we need all these elements on their own layer. So if anyone gets this file and just needs to edit those, they don't have to worry about touching type or type getting in the way. So with everything selected, I'm going to hit this new layer icon, and this little blue square over here, I'm just going to click it and I'm going to drag it up, and that pulls everything that was on this layer that's selected currently and puts it on the new layer. So I'm just going to label this layer elements, and then the other layer text. So if you turn things off and on, you can see it's appropriate. And I usually always leave the text layer unlocked, and I always lock my element layer. And now you have a print ready wedding invitation that's ready to go. And if you enjoyed this file, please, or this tutorial, please subscribe. I create a new tutorial almost every week. And if you're interested in seeing the entire 9-piece wedding pack that accompanies this invitation, I'm leaving a link in the description, so be sure to check it out. Thanks.